effectively wild. Give me effectively wild. Give me effectively wild. This is effectively wild.
Hello and welcome to episode 2419 of Effectively Wild, a baseball podcast from FanGraphs, presented by our Patreon supporters. I am Ben Lindbergh of The Ringer, hoping that you had a nice Christmas, even if it wasn't quite as lucrative as Tyler Soderstrom's, and I did indeed have a happy birthday. So thanks to those of you who wished me one. I got some good gifts. I did not receive an $86 million extension. Meg will be back next week, and I will put out one more call for stories we missed in 2025. We'll be going team to team and talking about some aspect of each team in 2025 that we did not discuss, at least not in any depth during this year. So if you have a nomination for a particular team, please email us. But today, in Meg's absence, I am once again joined by two excellent guests, Declan Cronin and Duncan Davitt. Declan and Duncan, Duncan and Declan, D&D. Both are right-handed pitchers who topped out at AAA in 2025. Both pitchers have interesting second jobs, and both are recently married. Aside from that, their years couldn't have gone much differently. Declan had a down year, Duncan had an up year, but they both ended up at the same level. So it was the worst of times, it was the best of times, but either way, it was AAA. Now, if you've been with us for a while, you've heard from Declan before. He has made 2 previous appearances on the podcast, and like Joe Sheehan, one of my guests on episode 2418, and also like Boog Shambi and Pablo Torre, for that matter, he attended the same high school as me, Regis High School in Manhattan, which made him of immediate interest to me when he made the major leagues in 2023. And in fact, we did a Meet a Major Leaguer segment back then, on which Declan himself appeared. I literally met him, at least via audio. So that was episode 2040. He debuted with the White Sox. He then spent just about the entirety of 2024 in the majors with the Marlins. He came back on the podcast on episode 2216. So I thought it would be nice to extend the streak to 3 straight years appearing on the podcast. The problem was, things didn't go as great for him this year. But I thought that might be interesting in its own way if he was willing to talk about it. And he was. He was hurt much of the year. He had a hip injury. It affected his performance when he was trying to rehab in AAA. One thing led to another, and suddenly he found himself having Tommy John surgery. So we will get into all of that, the hip, the elbow, the frustration of trying to pitch through an injury, being dropped by one team and picked up by another, and the positive takeaways from those downs and ups, how he'll handle a year away from pitching, his plans for the following season, and some personal stuff too. Declan's great. Always enjoy talking to him. I think he has some excellent insights here. My second guest, Duncan Davitt, is a couple years younger than Declan. Declan's 28, Duncan's 26. And whereas Declan is now in the Rangers organization, Duncan is with the White Sox, as Declan was when he first appeared on this podcast. Now, Duncan has not yet made his major league debut, but he's close. He is on the precipice. He's on the 40-man. He'll be in big league camp. And so my hope here is that we are pre-meeting a major leaguer, that he will get the call sometime soon and we'll be able to say, hey, we already met that guy. And I'm pleased to meet him because he has a really interesting side gig. He's a sports writer, so we'll get into that, his journalistic aspirations and training, and many aspects of his pitching performance as well. He had an eventful year too. He was traded on deadline day to the White Sox from the Rays in the Adrian Hauser deal. So I really like talking to both of these guys. I hope you'll like listening to me talk to them. And I won't delay any longer. It's time for our annual Declan check-in. Rejoining me now is not only the first Major League alum of Regis High School, but as far as I know, the first Tommy John surgery survivor of Regis High School. I can't confirm that, but seems fairly likely. Now a member of the Texas Rangers organization, Declan Cronin is here. Hello, Declan.
Hey, Ben. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming back. We are speaking while you're on a pit stop en route to your upcoming wedding. Congrats.
Thank you. Thank you.
When you attend the all-boys high school that we did, it does not seem like a given that you'll ever talk to a girl, let alone talk one into marrying you. So go us. We did it.
Huge win for the community at large. Yes, everyone.
I guess it's conceivable that your high school experience as a 6'4" future professional athlete was different from mine in some ways. I should allow for that possibility, perhaps. All I'll say is that my friends and I went to a Mets game on our prom night, and the high school girls of New York were not distraught about our absence. But enough about me. I Googled Declan Cronin registry to see if I could send you something, and the top 3 results are actually for another guy named Declan Cronin who just got married in October. Were you aware that there's another Declan Cronin who barely beat you down the aisle?
I was not aware, and I'll have to check out his registry maybe for some ideas. I wonder if we have similar taste or not.
I looked and there's nothing left on it, unfortunately.
Ah,
His
okay.
wedding was in October, so I guess everything was crossed off the list. So
Well, maybe his guests who weren't so timely with their gifts will head over to my registry and make the same mistake.
yeah,
So
could
one
be.
can only hope. Yeah.
I have to tell you what the fourth Google result was when I searched for Declan Cronin registry. An Amazon product listing added in April for, and I quote, just a girl who loves Declan Cronin, Miami baseball MLBPA V-neck t-shirt.
Oh,
It,
wow.
ha- it has a baseball mitt with a ball in it, and it says, just a girl who loves Declan Cronin with a little MLB Players logo at the bottom. It comes in black, baby blue, and dark heather gray. And here's what it says in the About This Item area. Whether you are a fan of Declan Cronin or just want the latest baseball apparel, this product is for you. I'm not sure that's true, honestly. If you just want the latest baseball apparel and you aren't a fan of Declan Cronin, I think it would be an unusual choice, I guess. But nonetheless, it continues, as a diehard Miami fan, this is the perfect design to show your classy style. And I know you're not with Miami anymore, which we will discuss, but the shirt doesn't say Miami or Marlins anywhere. Its text is in Marlins colors. So I think it's still good. And the page says this design is officially licensed by the MLBPA and is unique. So it's perfect to wear to show off your love for Declan Cronin.
Wow. Well, you just did my Christmas shopping for me because I'm going to
I
head
guess
over to
so.
that link right after we get
Yeah.
off here. And
Yeah.
everybody's getting one of those this year.
I might get one too. It's for women only, I guess. There's no men's version of the Just a Girl Who Loves Declan Cronin shirt, unfortunately. I wondered whether it actually was unique or if this is just something you could get for any MLB player. Like maybe there was just an automated thing that uploaded this for every player. So I looked. There's no Just a Girl Who Loves Kyle Stowers shirt. There's no Just a Girl Who
Oh,
Loves Jensen Junk shirt. So it actually does seem unique to you. I have no idea how this happened, but it did.
wow. That is interesting. And one can always count on you to do the deep digging on these things.
Yeah, you're not Googling yourself enough, clearly, because this is
Clearly
cursory
not.
research on my part. So,
No.
yeah, if you do have a registry, it just might not be a bad addition. Just $27.95. It seems like a steal.
Perfect.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about wedding scheduling because Brittany Giroli of The Athletic wrote an
Yeah.
article about a year ago about how it's tough to schedule your wedding as a baseball player. She wrote, there are only 2 months for a baseball wedding, November and December. Securing a date, not just for prospective venues, but to work around other engaged baseball couples is nearly its own sport. So has that been your experience?
Yeah. I remember reading that article and it was right after around the time that I got engaged. So it felt extremely relevant at the time. Yeah, there's definitely truth to that. I mean, obviously, as a baseball player, you miss a lot of weddings. I've missed a lot of close friends' weddings over the years because we're in season and really have no flexibility to travel outside of, whatever the game schedule demands. But when you're planning your own wedding, you're also similarly restricted by the demands of the schedule. So yeah, you really have, I guess, October through technically beginning of February, but I don't
Hmm.
think anybody wants to get married right before spring training or anything
Yeah.
like that. So when you actually sit down and look at the calendar, we wanted to do it before the new year because, generally January is a pretty serious time for on ramping. And also
Hmm.
my fiance plays professional soccer in the NWSL, so they
Oh, wow.
report in mid-January. So we also have her schedule to work around and that just adds a layer of complexity to it. But yes, that's very real. I know there was a lot of Marlins guys that got married this off season, and that was definitely the talk in the clubhouse last spring training was how everybody's weekends were filled with weddings, and some guys were going to have to unfortunately miss some for others of their own or whatever it might be. You can only plan so much, and there are really only so many weekends in the off season to get married.
Hmm.
It's definitely a real thing. We were lucky that we got a date that worked for a lot of people, but not for everybody.
Yeah, even October is kind of off limits. I mean, you hope it's off limits, right? You can't plan at least on being available in October because you hope you'll still be playing and your guests might too. So
Exactly. You can't schedule your wedding in October. That's a pretty bad juju.
what's going on with the MLB NWSL love connection here? Because it's you, I didn't even know, and then Dansby Swanson, right, and Jeremy Pena, all engaged and or married to NWSL players. Is there some sort of matchmaking service? How does this happen?
Yeah. I think we're all on the platform now. I noticed, obviously knew about Dansby and Mallory for a
Hmm.
while, just because both titans of their respective games.
Yeah.
Especially Mal is the face of professional women's soccer in America, I would say. But yeah, there's more of us than I realized. Maybe we should get a group together, a support group. No, I'm just kidding. But no, it's interesting. I wonder why that is. Part of it could be just that the seasons align, and
Hmm.
it makes things a little bit easier to have somebody that's can relate to our schedule, which is
Yeah.
not necessarily easy on significant others.
Yeah, I wonder about that because, I mean, it's not uncommon for people in similar lines of work to end up together just because you're in sort of the same circles. And in my circles, there are writers and journalists who end up getting married to each other, baseball writers, that sort of thing. My wife has nothing to do with the industry I'm in. And I actually kind of like that, I guess, because I worry that if she were in the same line of work, we'd just constantly be talking shop and we'd be like, I don't know, competing for stories or something. And just it would feel like I was kind of on the clock, even in my off hours or something. So is it good to have a fellow professional athlete to be kind of your life partner because you can identify over so many similar things and challenges and training or everything? Or does that make things even more difficult because you both have like all of these, competitive concerns and obligations and demands on your time?
I think it is ultimately a huge positive. Just someone who understands the fact that there's a limited window for a career, and there's certain sacrifices you need to make during those years to maximize your potential as an athlete and
Hmm.
your performance on the field. Like, it's very helpful when your partner is also kind of chasing those same goals.
Hmm.
No pun intended in Paige's case.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I think at least for us, it's been a huge benefit to be able to have someone that relates to that side of things, and can understand that while others might be doing more quote unquote fun stuff with their time, we're planning training and stuff in our off seasons, and even around the holidays and things like that, and around our own wedding, like just still finding a way to prioritize our career as athletes. Might seem a
Hmm.
little silly to other people, but for us, it's a huge deal, and it's nice that we both are kind of on the same page with that.
Yeah, I guess it's tough from a planning perspective, also, just in the sense that you never know where you're going to get traded or whatever. I mean, that's not easy on any family, obviously. And having to uproot your partner potentially or your kids or just see them only part of the time. But, if you're a baseball player and you've gone from the White Sox to the Astros to the Marlins to the Rangers, right? And, you hope you'll stay in one place for a while, but you never know for sure. And if your wife is in the same boat, then yeah, what happens, I guess, if you are playing in different places and your schedules don't sync up?
Yeah, I think we've never been in the same like even time zone. I don't think for more than a little bit at least. And Paige, my fiance, has done her fair share of bouncing around as well, trades, and she was taken a couple years ago in an expansion draft out to Salt Lake City. So she's been in Utah for the last couple years.
Mm.
Luckily, their season allows for a little more personal time. I would say that they have a few more 2 to 3 day chunks of off time
Hmm.
scattered throughout a pretty long season, a little bit longer than ours. So she's the MVP during the playing season, coming to see me kind of wherever I am. But it's been funny. We when I was in AAA in 2022 or three, we both had connecting flights through Atlanta, I want to say, and met in the airport for like a cup of coffee before she got on her flight to wherever she was going, and I got on mine.
Hmm.
So sometimes it's little stuff like that that just kind of the stars align. But
Hmm.
more often it's Paige coming out and spending a series with me
Yeah.
somewhere else. Obviously, this year will look a little bit different, but yeah, she's been fantastic.
Well, Jersey girl and Jersey guy, I see. So I guess
Yeah.
your roots are in the same vicinity at least.
Yes, yes, that is nice.
Okay. Well, enough prying into your personal life, at least for now. It's been an eventful year for you, and this is just the latest big life event and a happy one. This seems like a good way to end the year on an up note because it's been a challenging year, at least baseball wise, which was not the case in the two preceding seasons. I mean, they're all challenging in some way, but they were banner years for you. 2023, you make the majors. 2024, you spend the whole season in the majors. 2025, things didn't quite go as planned. So last year, you led all Marlins relievers by a lot in innings pitched. You had a very long streak of not allowing a home run, snapped only after I brought it up to you on Effectively Wild. And then you
Yes.
immediately gave up one. You were named the team's Rookie of the Year. So all going well. And then spring training arrived, and I guess the first sign of trouble was some left hip discomfort. So take me through that.
Yeah, in spring training last year, obviously, as you said, was feeling really good, was ready to kind of take another step forward and be an even bigger part of that bullpen and a part of a team that was looking to do some exciting things with a lot of other younger, whether in years or in experience players on that roster. And yeah, I don't know exactly when it was, but after, a couple outings, maybe even one or two outings, we identified some stuff that we wanted to work on. And I use we because there was truly a collective, agreement and effort. And I started adding a couple new drills to my kind of daily prep routine. And one of these ended up just completely, for lack of a better term, like shredding some of my deep internal rotators in my left hip. Maybe shredding's a little extreme, but certainly straining, and these are really delicate little muscles that even like the first doctor in Miami that read the MRI had to like look up what the names of the muscles were. That's how you know you're dealing with like a pretty unique injury. And the thing was, it would feel normal until kind of foot strike, and then when I was actually completing rotation of my hips was when I would feel the pain. So, obviously tried to throw through it for a little bit. We realized I was going to miss the start of the season, but thought it wouldn't be something that would keep me out much longer. So started the year on the IL, ended up, missing a good chunk of spring training as well. And unfortunately, the rehab for it was very touch and go. I think what we initially thought the injury was too was slightly different from what it actually was. I ended up, building up throwing wise, getting kind of cleared for a rehab assignment, but still not feeling 100%. And when I went like full game speed effort, I would feel it. But I was really eager to just get back to pitching in games. And
Mhm.
I think, if anything was pushing them to allow me to kind of rehab things a little quicker. Obviously, hindsight is 2020, and things that seem, you know, very apparent right now are rarely
Yeah.
as apparent to us at the time. So, what I probably should have done was taken some serious time off from throwing and just actually allowing the muscles and the tissue to fully heal before putting them through that stress again. But I wanted to kind of go, go, go. So we quote unquote kept the arm moving, kept throwing. I was cleared for a rehab assignment. I went out, I made one outing where I felt actually pretty good. And then I had a second outing either the next day or after one day's rest and felt kind of right back to square one with the hip. So I was
Mm.
pulled from my rehab assignment, go back to Miami. I end up getting in with a hip specialist in Nashville who saw things a little bit differently than what we had been seeing them as.
Mm.
And from that point on, kind of changed the rehab plan a little bit, took a little bit more time off from throwing, and but still was doing some like low effort throwing just to keep the arm moving in various ways. But started to come back from that. I'm feeling much better at that point. Like the pain threshold is down. I'm not really feeling it even when I am trying to find it, right? So like feeling really good about that. I want to say this is mid-May or so. I was ramping back up, getting cleared to go on another rehab assignment. I'm happy that I'm pain free. The team flew me up to Chicago through live ABs at Wrigley and felt really good. And that was like a really good day. And I was cleared to go on a rehab assignment. So I went back on a rehab assignment. And this whole time, my velocity had been down a little bit. My shapes had been a little bit off, but I and everyone else kind of thought, okay, you're just getting back into the swing a bit. Like, you got to remember, this is kind of like a second off-season on-ramp for you. Like, things aren't going to
Hmm.
be as crisp as you want them to be. The calendar says May or June, but to your body, this is like October, November, December, right? Like, you're going to have to work through some stuff, right? So I went back out on my rehab outing. I was pain-free, but I think I made three or four outings and just didn't look like myself. So I was optioned because I was healthy, and the conversation was still, look, this is going to be a 1 or 2 week thing. You're going to come back, find your stride, and you'll be back in the bullpen. Just like right now, you're just not who you are. Like, you're not pitching to your
Yeah.
full capability. The numbers aren't where we need them to be or where you need them to be. And I completely agreed. I mean, at the time I was saying I'm pain free. I really thought I was 1 or 2 weeks out from everything clicking. I also didn't want to be prematurely, dropped into the major leagues where, you know, quite frankly, it's tough up there. You want to really feel like your best self, or at least something close to it when you're going out there every day. And I
Yeah.
didn't feel like that. I didn't have the confidence or the performance kind of metrics to justify that. So I think we were all on board with that, as frustrating as it was. But yeah, so I was in AAA, and honestly, I just never got back to what I felt like before the hip injury. And when I was looking at video, and even speaking to the biomechanists in Miami, things were just different. And unfortunately, like, I was trying to cue things and working on various drills and stuff and daily work, and certainly no shortage of people trying to help me.
Hmm.
But my body had patterned over months of low intensity throwing and or throwing with pain, like a certain kind of compensatory movement patterns that just totally compromised my ability to throw how I want to throw.
Yeah.
And so even though I was pain free, I could not convince myself to throw normally and to use my lower half specifically normally. And there were a lot of other compensations, one of which was things in my upper half were compensating around what was happening on the lower half, which led to some shoulder pain initially. I ended up getting a little brief IL stint to let that calm down. And then the All-Star break. And when I came back from the All-Star break, the shoulder felt good, but I was moving the same way. And I remember thinking to myself, like, something has to give here because I can't keep throwing like that. And my velocity actually started to creep up while I looked still the same kind of just bad moving, bad mechanics way on the mound.
Hmm.
And, I think after a couple of weeks, like, I still was starting to throw a little bit harder, but shapes were not there. Something was still not right. And eventually, obviously culminated in, blowing out my elbow, which, the thought crossed my mind. Not that I felt anything at my elbow, but looking at myself throw and looking at video and breaking things down, I was just like, this, I don't know how much longer I can keep this up
Yeah.
before something goes wrong, like, especially adding in increased velocity and stuff like that. My body was finding a way to produce better output, but it
Hmm.
didn't look how it should have. So yeah, it ended up kind of ending in the worst way possible.
Phew. Yeah, that's a lot to go through. What was the initial drill, the fateful drill that you think could have started all of this?
Yeah, I think it was a water bag drill we were doing where we had identified that there was some room for there was some skin on the bone in terms of how I was completing rotation with my hips after landing. And I totally agreed. I mean, we had good conversations with this, myself and the staff in Miami, and I was on board that my 2024 movement was a little bit off from spring training 2025, and they thought that this was a good drill that would help kind of feel what it was like to get back into that position. And I totally agreed, and I actually really liked the feel. The problem was, I think it was just too much force, and load on a pretty like end range position in the hip. And again, like, you could give that drill to 99 guys, and maybe only one guy tears those tiny little muscles that I did.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, that is what happened. So yeah.
Yeah, it's got to be frustrating to not know what's wrong exactly because at least if you blow out your elbow, that's bad news. But at least there's kind of a clear way to treat it or a recourse, or, we'll get into what the actual diagnosis and treatment there was. But yeah, if you're kind of have something that's uncommon and maybe experts seem to disagree about it, then it's tough to know where to go next or what exactly is wrong because you kind of have to identify the problem before you can come up with a solution.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it was just one of those things where people just really didn't have an answer. And even the specialist that we saw in Nashville, he and his team had really only seen it in like a couple hockey players.
Hmm.
And usually when people have that injury that I had, it also comes with like some serious trauma to the hip at large. Like, you're also tearing a lot of other stuff and these muscles get there. Like no
Yeah.
one had really seen. Everything looks fine except these two little muscles buried deep in the hip musculature. Like that was what was so odd about it, is there really wasn't there is no return to play plan for that. And so, we were kind of just trying to do our best, and I think we did do that, but we just didn't, know, and there was really no precedent for it, especially for baseball.
Yeah, you didn't get body checked into the boards or anything, which would make it easier to figure
Right.
out what happened.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah, so I guess it's often called a cascade injury or an injury cascade when one thing goes wrong and then you compensate maybe even without being aware of it, and then that places additional strain on something that's not accustomed to it, and then something else down the chain breaks too. And I guess maybe that's what happened with the hip and then forcing you to do different things. And then that has an effect on the elbow. So was it a single traumatic thing where you felt something give, or was it just that things weren't feeling right? So you got checked out and realized there was an issue with the elbow?
It was one pitch. It's honestly, it's so funny and strange. Like you hear people describe the feeling of what it's like to tear your UCL, but if you've never experienced it yourself, you don't quite know exactly what they're, referring to
Yeah.
and describing. But when it happened on that pitch, I immediately knew. Like I
Mm.
immediately was kind of matching what I was feeling up with, the probably tens of descriptors I've heard from other people. And obviously with UCLs, it's going to be different for everybody. I forget the percentage, but I think I want to say it's actually more often that you don't feel like a pop or a one pitch that you can point to where it happens.
Hmm.
But for me, I could. I mean, I remember I could feel the space in my elbow expand at ball release. If as crazy as that sounds, and we're talking about millimeters here, like it just felt different, and then was obviously quite painful. But I kind of felt that pop and release of tension.
Okay, yeah, I was going to ask if it was actually pain or if it was just sort of an unnatural sensation or a popping feeling, but I guess all of the above.
Yeah, I mean, in the immediate aftermath, it was quite painful, and I actually tried to throw another pitch after, and kind of I played it off like, oh, that was weird, even though in my head I think I knew,
Yeah.
but I threw another pitch after, and that was quite painful. But then it was kind of weird because by like the next morning, nothing really hurt except the tests that are designed to hurt it. Like
Mm.
so that was kind of interesting too. Like I expected it to hurt ambiently a little more than it did, but it's certainly a unique thing.
So if you could go back in time, I guess you said, you'd rather that you had just taken more time off. It's tough because you're coming off this successful first full season and you want to build on that, and you probably feel like your team needs you. The Marlins finished 26th in bullpen WAR this past season, although 5th in bullpen win probability added. So I guess they had great timing. So that's kind of interesting. But yeah, how would you advise that teams try to counteract that tendency to rush guys back or, talk players out of that idea that like, I gotta keep going because it must be so hardwired into you as an athlete?
Yeah, I think it's very difficult to be off the field, especially for something that isn't like an elbow surgery or a labrum or an ACL or something like that. For a kind of weird soft tissue injury, you almost want to just, get it over with and get back out there. But I think there's a lot of obviously incentives out there, and I guess most of them are aligned. They want you back out there, you want to be back out there. Maybe the timelines look a little bit different one way or the other. Usually, one of the two parties is a little more cautious than the other. I think the first time around, maybe I was a little more aggressive, and then after seeing the specialists, they were, or sorry, other way around. After seeing the specialists, I think they were a little more, cautious and encouraging me to take the time it took. But yeah, I mean, it's tough being off the field. And again, especially for something that doesn't have a set timeline like that, or you don't really know what you're dealing with, you're going to want to kind of set that timeline yourself. And, I got in my head that, okay, I want to be back in a couple weeks. So, okay, what do I need to do to get back in a couple weeks? I need to, keep throwing and get ready and just hope that the hip meets me somewhere along the way. Which wasn't the case, but I think it's very difficult, especially in my case, it's very difficult. But in general, I think it's difficult because obviously the best thing to do probably is to be extremely cautious, but that keeps players off the field longer, and you can't do that. You can't just shut everybody down anytime something happens and then ramp them back up and miss half the season for something relatively minor, even though that might be the best for their longevity or something like that. We understand that, our job is to be out on the field playing. So I think it's tough. And obviously, as you said, like the cascading effects, yes, we're all aware. And I think, I was trying to mitigate those. It's especially not lost on me that these things happen, that one thing can lead to another. But ultimately, it's really tough when you're going out there and still, trying to pitch in games and collect outs, whether it's in AAA or the big leagues. Like you're a competitor first, and you're thinking less about everything else, I think, when the lights turn on.
So your last outing in the minors, I assume that's when this happened, was August 16th. And then you got the surgery late September, right? So what happened in the interim? Did you have to get multiple opinions, or was it pretty clear cut what you were going to do?
It was pretty clear cut. So I decided with the Marlins and myself and my agent that I would have Keith Meister in Dallas do the surgery. He's obviously the hottest ticket in town these days, unfortunately, because there's so many surgeries to be done. And so while we were somewhat fast tracked to get in with him, it just took a little bit of time to get in, meet with his team, and then get a surgery date on the calendar. Because of when it happened, it was pretty clear that unless I got the surgery right away, I'd probably miss 2026 season anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So that gave us a little bit of grace there, that there wasn't like a huge rush to get under the knife as much as I wanted as soon as possible, obviously, to start that clock. So yeah, I mean, I did fly out to Dallas to see him. The MRI was read by a number of people within Miami's kind of network of doctors, and was pretty clear that I needed, the full UCL reconstruction, but nobody really wanted to say that for sure until I had seen him.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I saw him, he was like, "Yeah, your ligament's shredded, man. Like there's no hope here.
No PRP and rest."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So he's like, "You got two options. You can get the surgery, or you can like try to rehab it and probably never throw a pitch again." So basically, you're getting the surgery. Yeah, it just took a little bit of time, honestly, just to get on the calendar there. So part of that was, or a result of that was nice that I was able to do a lot of like prehab work. So I had really over a month to prepare my body for the surgery. So I was just kind of working out, 5 days a week and doing a lot of prehab work for the surrounding musculature in the forearm and the arm itself to make rehab as easy as possible and on myself, and to hit the ground running as best as possible. So in that sense, there's been a lot of research that's very beneficial for ACLs, where actually delaying surgery and doing a set kind of prehabilitation program leads to better outcomes on the back end. I don't think there's research for the UCL, at least not documented, but that was kind of the attitude I had, was that, this will be good for me in the long run. Will make rehab a better road.
Yeah, so there was no possibility of internal brace or one of the newer variants of the surgery. It was just straight ahead traditional TJ.
Yeah, you're really kind of at the mercy of how the ligament tears, and just the kind of the way that mine was torn. There was really nothing to brace, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
But what Keith Meister does, and what a lot of surgeons now are doing, is actually, when they take the graft and put in your new ligament, he adds an internal brace as well. So you're getting the best of both worlds as well. So I have a new ligament taken from right behind my knee, and I have that kind of wrapped around the internal brace. So in theory, this thing is as strong as it can get.
Yeah. So you're one of the lucky 70, it looks like, major or minor league pitchers as of this recording who've undergone a documented Tommy John surgery this season. So plenty
Wow.
of company.
Yes, no shortage
Unfortunately.
of company. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, right, exactly.
And were you talking to a bunch of other people in the game who've had it already about tips and tricks?
Yeah, honestly, it was fantastic. The outpouring of support from guys that I've played with at some point, but maybe don't keep in touch with regularly, who saw the news and reached out with advice and encouragement and stuff like that. It's been really helpful. Obviously, there were a fair number of guys in the Marlins org as well who were the first to reach out and kind of offer me anything they could to help with what to expect and certain things they wish they knew going in and stuff like that. So that's been really helpful. There's obviously a huge and ever growing community of guys that have gone through it, which certainly helps as somebody going through it for the first time to know that a lot of the guys I've played with and guys I look up to have undergone this and come back from it even better and gone on to throw a lot more innings.
So by the time you actually went under the knife, you were no longer a member of the Marlins organization, right? Because
Yes.
they released you in September. So walk me through this, because I guess they had the option. I mean, you weren't in the big leagues when this happened, but you were on the 40-man, right? So
Yes.
a team could just continue to carry a player on the 40-man while he rehabs from this surgery, and you could, keep using their facilities or whatever, right? So were you expecting that to happen? Did it take you by surprise that you were released before the surgery, or how does that typically work?
Yes, it was very surprising. Certainly not something that I anticipated or anybody close to me anticipated, but also kind of wasn't what we had been told, but and nothing I'd ever seen before. But check the rule book; they're allowed to do it. So power to them to exercise their rights. I'm not one to get in the way of that. But yes, it was shocking. I was actually in North Carolina, out in Cary, like Raleigh area, and I was happy to be able to catch one of my fiance's games in September, which is a rare slash impossible occurrence with my normal schedule.
Yeah.
And it was the night before her game. I turned my phone off and I was just about to set my alarm. This was like 10 something at night, and I realized I have a missed call. So I call the number back, and then I'm informed by a Marlins front office member that I'm being released. And that's kind of it. So that was the last I spoke to anyone over there.
Yeah.
And that was, pretty close to the surgery date at that point, which also, obviously, just as a human being, was a little bit stressful to hear.
Yeah.
In my head, I'm thinking, okay, I'll be on the 60-day IL next year. It's not ideal, but as situations go, it gives me a good chance to get back and get all the resources I need and have a fair shake at earning my spot back in 27.
Yeah.
But now that's kind of thrown out the window.
Yeah.
After I received that phone call.
That seems kind of callous. I wonder, I mean, is this something that you think there should be a rule change, or that you would advocate for? I assume it's a collective bargaining issue, but is that something you would be in favor of, preventing a team from doing what happened to you?
Well, the reason it's so rare is that most teams wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
They would rather actually hold on to the player and rehab them and see what they've got on the other end. You just don't hear about it because most organizations don't, I guess operate that way. But the thing with the release versus DFA too is in the rule that they can release me, but they are punished by I become a free agent, so I
Yeah.
can go anywhere.
Right.
Obviously, players are protected from being DFA'd while they're injured, because then if they clear waivers, they just end up at the same team, and you've effectively just gotten the guy off the roster who's going under surgery, which is probably worse. So given the choice between the two poisons, you'd rather be released. And again, I don't think there needs to be any huge legislation about this because it doesn't happen, because it doesn't usually align with what the teams want. But obviously, if you're
Right.
looking to, well, I actually don't even want to speculate on what the reasons were. So,
Hmm.
but one can imagine if you don't want to, pay the money for a year or something like that, and that's the
Right.
reason, then
Yeah.
I guess you should be able to do that.
Does that have then service time implications for you if you had been on the 40 man throughout the rehab and recovery and everything, that you could have been accruing service time? Or,
Yeah, so I
yeah.
would have gotten a full year of service time next year.
Well, that sucks.
Yeah,
That's-
yeah. Ben, it's not ideal, but I'm at least at peace with the logic of it. And you know, at the end of the day, too, like Miami was great to me. They gave me a lot of opportunity, and they selected me off waivers in 2024, right before spring training, and gave me a shot and a really fair shot. And I really enjoyed my time there. So I don't want to say, just because of how it ended, I don't want to,
yeah.
give the impression that I'm not grateful for everything they did do for me.
Hmm.
Um, Obviously, how it ended is just tough, but ultimately, like, I can be pretty dispassionate about this stuff. Like, they felt it was the right decision for the baseball club, and they made it. So it's like, it's okay. I'm okay with the logic of that, at least.
Yeah, I guess you come to terms pretty quickly with the whole baseball is a business maxim. So,
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, they do have a full 40 man roster right now, but I don't know how urgent it was. I mean, I guess they're hoping to contend. They had a somewhat surprisingly successful season, but, I haven't really gone through the 40 man to see, like, was there really no room at the inn that they couldn't have carried you for a year there? But that's, kind of cold blooded. I mean, that seems like the sort of thing that maybe wouldn't like lead to the best reputation for an organization when it comes to like being player friendly and everything. And, obviously you've gone to the Rangers. We'll talk about that. But in the immediate aftermath of it, like, do they have any obligations to you in terms of like, I mean, I assume the procedure's covered by insurance. And then, like, if you have training facilities that you can use, like, was that even a question of, like, where am I even going to recover from this?
Yeah, so that is a nice protection that's in there, is that if I had not signed with anybody, they would be still obligated to cover all of the surgery, rehab, and everything until I
Okay.
was like cleared to play, basically.
Uh-huh. And so you would have, like, awkwardly been at their facilities, even though they've released you. So,
No, I would
or,
not be welcome at their facilities. I would
oh,
have to be
okay.
doing that
You'd have to
somewhere
do
else,
that
but they would
independently.
cover it.
I
Yes,
see.
yes, exactly.
Huh. Okay. Well, fortunately, that isn't an issue now because the Rangers signed you shortly after the surgery, I guess. Is that right? And you signed a 2-year minor league deal, which is kind of unusual. It's not uncommon to see a multi-year major league deal for someone who is returning from surgery, and you figure that they're probably not going to pitch that first season or not much, and you're hoping that you can kind of catch them on the rebound in the second season. But you don't often, I don't think, see the multi-year minor league deal, and maybe that's because you don't often see what happened to you, because
Yeah, yeah,
usually you would just still be in your old organization. So
right.
how did this take shape and when?
Things happened very quickly. My agent was down with me in Texas when I had the surgery, and as soon as it was, a success, and Dr. Meister signed off on that, he immediately went to work. And by the time I woke up from my anesthesia-induced drowsiness that afternoon, where I napped for about 3 hours in the hotel, he had already, talked to a large percentage of the teams in baseball and gotten some, obviously we had the benefit of a pretty long runway before surgery to have a lot of these conversations. But, once the surgery was deemed a success, we didn't have offers in hand that day, but we had a ton of interest, and we're feeling really good about my
Mhm.
chances to get a 2-year deal, which obviously is what we wanted because, I'll miss this next season. So wanted someone who was, obviously invested in, with some skin in the game for a fair shake in 27. Texas was one of those teams, but was just one of many, honestly. And then when Skip Schumacher got hired as manager there, we had a brief kind of back and forth. And then the next day I had an offer in my hands from them.
He was your
And
manager in 2024 for anyone who's
right,
not making that
yes,
connection.
sorry,
Yeah, yeah.
yep, that's important context, honestly. And so we had an offer from them, and they were actually the quickest to get us, something in writing, and we liked the way it looked. And obviously, I have said it a million times to anybody who'll listen that I'd play for Skip any day. So I was really excited to see that he was over there. So we jumped at the opportunity to get into that org. And obviously, I know a lot of other, staff, actually know some of the medical team over there, and some players, and it just felt like a really good landing spot. They have a really good reputation for just kind of how they treat players, and especially on the rehab side of things, how they take care of guys and get them back return to play wise. So the stars seemed to kind of align in that 24 hours, and we got the deal done, which was really exciting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now you can get tips from Jacob deGrom, I guess, maybe.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, there's another guy that's been through it. So
yeah, I think we've wondered about this before on the podcast. You call a manager Skip. So what do you call a manager whose nickname was already Skip? Do you call him Skip, or does that seem too familiar?
that is really funny. We've joked about that too. Skip is Skip, but sometimes maybe Skipper. I don't know.
Okay.
I think last year in Miami, I always called Clayton McCullough Skipper because it
Yeah.
just felt weird to call him Skip after that was our manager's name the year before.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll get over that one day, but yeah.
Right. What do players call you? Do you have a baseball nickname?
Not really. In Miami, funny enough, a lot of the guys called me Crowbar. We were joking around Players Weekend in 2024, like what our nicknames would be if they went back to the jerseys
Yeah.
that had nicknames on the back. And I think Max Meyer came up with Crowbar for me, and it actually stuck to the point where like all of the staff and players called me that in Miami, for the next year or so.
Okay. We'll see if it follows you to Texas. Maybe
Yeah, maybe.
Skip will bring it with him.
Yeah.
So what was the actual surgery like? I assume most listeners have had some sort of surgery, if not Tommy John surgery. Is it like any surgery that requires anesthesia? Like how long are you under, and what kind of preparations do you have to do, and what's the immediate recovery like?
Yeah, I might be a bad person to ask for this because it's actually the first surgery I've ever had.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
so to me, it was unlike anything I'd ever done before, but might be like any surgery you might have done to you.
Yeah.
But yeah, pretty standard. Yes, went under, I think it was a very quick surgery, around 45 minutes or so.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, full anesthetic. Woke up, was, pretty out of it and pretty uncomfortable for that next day or so. The worst part for me, my arm felt great after surgery. Like I had no pain in my elbow even from the trauma of the incisions and what they're, the work they're doing in there. My arm has felt great ever since, but I got my graft from my leg, as I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
That was 100 times worse.
Huh.
Like pain wise, restricting mobility. I couldn't really bend my leg much for the first 24, 48 hours ish. So getting up and down out of seats or in and out of bed was really, really difficult. And they definitely undersold that, maybe intentionally so. But yeah, I was on a crutch for the first 4 or 5 days, and then did rapidly get better, which is what they said, is they're like, oh, it'll hurt a little bit. But by a week out, nobody really complains about it anymore, which ended up being true. But I think they undersold how bad the first, 72 hours would be.
Mhm.
So that was really what I was complaining about mostly. And the next day when I went in for my post-op, they were like, "Oh yeah, that's what everybody says. Well, you're actually moving better than everybody or most people that we see," which was hard to believe because I was hobbling around at a snail's pace with a crutch.
Mhm.
But that was actually way worse, and I had to do a lot of rehab for that as well.
Mhm.
But I guess that was kind of the immediate aftermath. Yeah, flying was interesting. I was lucky that the fine folks at American Airlines took great care of me and definitely took some pity on me as well, seeing me in that pretty disheveled state the next day. But we got from point A to point B all right. And yeah, honestly, once about after a week or so, I was starting to feel more like myself and getting around the house and going to PT and starting the process.
And now you're about 3 months removed. So where are you in the process?
Yeah, I know it's crazy. Time has definitely flown. I shedded my brace at 6 weeks, so I'm just over 11 weeks now. So I'm out of the brace. I have full range of motion, starting to get my strength back next Monday. So a little wedding present to myself. I'll be able to get back in the gym with my right arm and start
Oh, perfect.
uh, kind of unrestricted weightlifting. Obviously, I got a long way to go to regain the real strength there, but in terms of the little stuff and physical therapy, things have been going really well. So the arm feels great, the leg feels really good. Starting to feel more like an athlete every day, which is nice because obviously, as anyone who's been through any sort of procedure like that, knows it's really tough to all of a sudden not be able to do all of the things that you like to do, especially, physical activity and working out and things like that. So, and then, multiply that by 100 for someone whose livelihood is, involved with getting into the gym and stuff like that. So it's been really nice to get back into the swing of things that way. And, every day I'm getting closer to picking up a baseball again. So, that kind of keeps me motivated.
Yeah, I know just from what other pitchers say that it's odd when you start throwing again, and it just feels like you're kind of relearning how to throw and don't know where your arm is in space and all of that. So I guess that's all ahead of you, but
Yeah.
it'll be good to embark on that part of the process at least, and it's good that you're less encumbered now.
Yeah.
Do you have any big picture thoughts about just, the scourge of UCL surgeries and how this just seems to be the bane of baseball's existence now? And I guess from your, I guess I should say fiance, although by the time people hear this, it will be wife, assuming she doesn't have any second thoughts at the last second. I'm sure she won't. But in soccer, it's ACLs, right? In women's soccer. And
Yeah.
in baseball, it's UCLs. I mean, it's you are one of the pitchers who had a velo boost, right? That's something that you trained for. We probably talked about it on one of your previous appearances, and it seems like there is kind of a correlation there between guys throwing max effort and trying to throw as hard as they can, and inevitably there's going to be some weak point, and the UCL is often it. But all the incentives are aligned for a pitcher to throw as hard as they can, to throw the nastiest stuff, to not really take anything off. So do you have any thoughts on how baseball can sort of solve this problem of, not getting guys kind of conditioned to be the next on the table?
Yeah, no, I mean, I probably don't have anything that hasn't been said by someone at some point. I can only really speak to my personal experience with it, which is, for me, like you spoke about, like, I had, velocity gains and certainly stuff gains, because I'm still not a guy that throws, upper 90s, right? Like, I'm 93 to 95 and try to manipulate the baseball to be most effective. But if you gave me the choice between throwing 89 or 90 and never getting hurt or having the kind of career arc I've had now, if you gave me that choice 5 years ago, like, I wouldn't be playing baseball still, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
like, you have to think about it from that standpoint, right? Like, the alternative to, not gaining velocity or not trying to maximize your stuff and get the nastiest pitches you can is being out of baseball, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you don't need Tommy John if you don't have a job and aren't playing baseball.
Yeah.
So I think obviously there's things that we can do to mitigate the risks, and I think there's a lot of people working really hard on that problem. But the incentives of the game, from a pitcher standpoint, are to number one, primarily get batters out, but also to reduce contact, increase whiffs, strikeout percentage, stuff like that. And the way to do that, we know, is to throw harder, throw nastier pitches that get more whiffs,
Mm-hmm.
and until the object of the game changes, I just don't see this curve really like flattening, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And there's certain things you can do to, like I said, like to mitigate that and to lower those risks. And I think, I did a lot of that. Like, I think maybe, if I don't train the way I do and take the kind of preventative measures I've taken in my career, I potentially blow out sooner. But
Mm-hmm.
it feels almost inevitable at this point for guys. If you play long enough, you're going to have some sort of injury. It's like much rarer to see the guy that has a long career who hasn't gone under the knife at some point.
Yep. And one possible solution I've advocated for is, well, if you reduce the number of pitchers on the active roster, then maybe that trickles down and eventually you get back to a place where guys are going deeper into games and, they have to pace themselves more and it's not max effort all the time.
Sure.
But I'm not a pitcher, so that's easy for me to say. Maybe you're thinking, wait, hold on a second. You want to lower the number of pitchers on the roster. That means fewer spots for me. So that doesn't work out in your favor either. So yeah, there are all these competing incentives. And I guess what's good for the game in theory might not be good for an individual player, even if it's designed to sort of protect players. So it's all kind of an intractable problem, though I hope it won't be forever.
No, and I do as well. I just maybe it's just above my head or my pay grade, but I don't see like a set solution because even what you suggest, like my first thought is, but tell that to the guy that's there throwing, not max effort and just getting whacked around the yard. Like this is
Mhm.
good for you. This is good for the game.
Yeah.
Like he's not going to like that very much,
Right.
right? He's going to want to, try to strike guys out again, and that's really tough. I don't know. I don't know
Yeah.
how we get around that.
Yeah, and it's bad for the game to not really be able to invest in a pitcher because you feel like, well, they might not be on the mound next year. You buy your
Yeah.
just a girl who loves Declan Cronin shirt, and then maybe you can't wear it out to a Declan Cronin game for a while because you're off the field. So that stinks. It stinks for fans. It obviously stinks
Totally.
more for you, for the person who's actually getting the surgery. But do you think that because of the enforced inactivity, that will benefit your hip? Do you have any concerns about the hip when your elbow is ready for action again?
No, I don't. I'm feeling good there. And even by the time that I did blow out my elbow, like my hip was feeling good. It was just a
Okay.
matter of the movement patterns had become so,
Yeah.
for lack of a better term, jacked up by months of really bad habit forming.
Yeah.
It wasn't actually like an injury anymore. But I'm sure it'll only help uh,
Yeah.
with being able to kind of pattern things the way I want to when I get back, though.
Yeah. You just have to unlearn what you've learned, I guess, in those last few months, whatever it was that you were trying to compensate for. And
Yeah.
and I guess, there's kind of mostly a myth, I think, of the idea that guys come back throwing harder and better than ever. I think maybe that's partly the perception is just because you weren't throwing as hard as you usually do before you got hurt, like your velo was
Yeah.
down a
Yeah.
little bit. And so if you just get
Yeah.
back to your baseline, then it looks like you got a boost, but really it was just getting back to where you were. But they do say also that just because of the training and the amount of time you're spending in the gym just recovering from the surgery and getting back to full strength, that, I mean, it doesn't seem like, not staying in shape was an issue for you. But I guess if you weren't fully getting after it pre-surgery, then just the work it takes to get back maybe gets you in the best shape of your life, perhaps.
Yeah, I think you definitely see that. And even for someone like me, I think it's still a really unique opportunity where you don't have to, worry about competition for a little bit and can really just be completely developmentally focused for a 12-month period.
Right. Yeah. So what will you do then with this year off, which is unusual in the middle of a career? Are you just going to be a regular at Utah Royals FC games, or do you have to be or want to be around the team? I mean, like, what's your kind of connection to the Rangers while you're in this sort of transitional period, while you're a member of the organization, but not actually suiting up?
Yeah, good question. So I'll actually be going to Major League Spring Training with everybody else, and then I'm going to be in Arizona rehabbing for
Right.
the year. So I'll be at the complex up in Surprise, rehabbing there. Obviously, would love to be a Utah Royals super fan and hit every game. I might have an opportunity to hit a few more than I normally would during the
Yeah.
season. But yeah, no, I'll be going into the complex every day and working with the PTs there, strength coaches there, rehab pitching staff there for 2026. Yeah.
And you still have a side gig, right? We've talked about your job at Tread Athletics, and you still have that. So you're an operations specialist there. Does this give you more time to work on things there, or is it still sort of the same workload?
I anticipate the workload being, fairly similar
Hmm.
to years past, but yeah, that will be really nice as always to stay kind of clued in and connected to those guys
Yeah.
back in Charlotte when I'm gone.
And it seems like the reputation of Tread has only been enhanced because Tyler Zombro, who worked there or still works there in some capacity, maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah, he was
yeah,
hired by the Cubs about a year ago as a special assistant, and then they just promoted him to vice president of pitching after this most
yes,
recent season. So that probably reflects well on the entirety of Tread. So I guess that's good. And
yeah.
you've probably learned from being a colleague of his. What's
Oh yeah.
what's the latest buzz at Tread? Because every year there's like, here's the new hot pitching trend, and it seemed like this year it was more about just like everyone having really deep repertoires and even relievers just throwing more pitch types than everything. That was the big buzz. And in the past,
Yeah.
it's been about it's the year of the sweeper, it's the year of the splitter, right? We saw tons of splitters on display in the postseason this year, and so people were, or the sinkers making a comeback, or the death ball was a Tread thing,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
That's right. Yeah.
yeah. So what's the cutting edge now, or going into 2026?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I think the kick change last
Right,
year got a lot of
right.
press as well, and that was a really big one. Yeah, that's a good question. Maybe because I'm not throwing, I'm not as clued into or interested in that stuff right now. Like I'm not having as many of those conversations. Um, I know right now everybody's really gearing up for their pro day, which is a huge event. It's like a 3 day event where all 30 teams are represented and all free agents come into town or in town and throw.
Hmm.
So that's a big point of focus. They're also doing some work with Asian teams in the KBO and the NPB. So that's been really exciting. We see a lot of those guys in house in Charlotte now every day,
Hmm.
from various teams from overseas. In terms of the next big fad, I'm not really sure if I have an answer on that one. I'm sure something will come up and we can turn back to here and say, how did you not know this? But I can't, nothing comes to the top of my head. And I'm not being, secretive or coy. I really don't, I
Hmm.
don't know.
Yeah, yeah. Me neither. But
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure
maybe
we'll
it'll.
find out together though. There's always something.
Right, probably. Well, I'm glad that we could catch up, and I'm sorry that it was a rough year professionally speaking, but hopefully this was sort of an illuminating conversation as well, because we talked when you were riding high and things were going great, and I certainly hope that that will be the case again soon. But it's also probably eye-opening, I guess, to go through a year when everything kind of goes wrong, and.
Yeah.
And yeah, then the insult to injury of the release, and then the surgery, and just all the rest of it. Yeah, I guess this was hopefully the bottom, and it'll only be uphill from here in 2026 and beyond.
Yeah. Yeah. That's how I feel about it too. So, no, this is great. I'm
Yeah.
always happy to talk and can't always just be talking when things are going great. So,
Right. Yeah. It's the whatever the say, if you don't love me at my worst, you don't get to love me at my best, or whatever the Marilyn Monroe attributed saying is. So yeah, we got to talk to you when things aren't going so great, so that we can celebrate the highs again when you get back to those. Is there anything that, like, given this time off, a longer term project that you are able to undertake because you normally just wouldn't have as much downtime? I mean, whether it's like learning a new pitch or something, I guess you always have the off season to work on things that are more in depth, but I wonder if it's a time to step back and take stock and say, what do I want to do with this time to improve myself as a pitcher while I have the capacity to?
yeah, I think I want to treat myself as close to a kind of blank slate as possible when coming back. Obviously, I'll have certain, touchstones that make me who I am, but I'm really excited to talk to, the staff in Texas about, their ideas for what, I can, change, improve, modify, work on moving forward to, what they envision me being as someone that contributes to their club in 2027. So while I don't necessarily have the answers right now to what that looks like I'm excited for those conversations and definitely want to use this as an opportunity to maybe work on some things that I either haven't had, the time or bandwidth to in the past, but now given this kind of unique situation,
Mhm.
we'll actually have the opportunity to do. So yeah, I'd be very surprised if you see me on a mound in 2027 and everything repertoire wise and even, delivery looks the exact same. I want to use this as an opportunity to, right the wrongs and improve things that I can in this, unique time frame that I have.
Mhm.
So yeah, we'll see what that looks like. I don't really know right now, but I'm definitely looking to do whatever I can.
All right. Well, looking forward to seeing you back out there eventually, however you look, and good luck with the rest of the rehab and the recovery, and of course, the wedding.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, I appreciate that.
And this past Saturday, Declan did indeed marry Paige Monahan at the Church of St. Ignatius Loyola, no less. That's just across the street from our high school, where we each went to Mass while we were at Regis. Somewhat reluctantly, in my case. Hey, you had to have been baptized to get in, but you didn't have to be a believer. But I am very grateful for that high school experience. And no, I'm not giving away any secrets here. Paige put pictures on Instagram. Looks like it was a lovely ceremony, and I'm very happy that Declan was able to wrap up a rough year professionally with a happy personal milestone. He seems to have a good head on his shoulders, but I'd expect nothing less from a fellow Regian. Now, let's get to our second AAA pitcher of 2025, White Sox righty Duncan Davitt.
2-2 pitch. Swing and a miss. Davitt's 2-2. Got him swinging as this pitch comes in, and it's a called strike 3. Pitch swung on and missed, not even close on a slider. 2 on, nobody out. The 1-2 got him swinging. Payoff pitch with 2 on. This is the big one. Here it is, and he got him swinging. 1-2 swung on and missed. 1-2 coming. Swing and a miss. 2-2 incoming. Slider got him for strike 3. 2 ball, 2 strike pitch, and it's tipped into the mitt. Davitt's got his 10th strikeout.
Well, on the Friday before Christmas, the Indianola, Iowa boys and girls high school basketball teams took tough losses against the Norwalk Warriors, coming off of convincing wins over the Lincoln Rail Splitters. I know that thanks to Duncan Davitt, sports reporter for the Indianola Independent Advocate. But Duncan doesn't just write sports stories, he's also the subject of them. He's right-handed pitcher in the White Sox system who made it to AAA this year, was recently added to a 40-man roster for the first time, and is one promotion away from the majors. And now, instead of doing the interviewing, he is the interviewee on Effectively Wild. Welcome, Duncan.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
I believe you got added to the 40-man, 3 days after you got married? Something like that?
Yeah.
That's quite a week.
Yeah, it was a good week. Meant to buy a Powerball ticket, didn't get around to doing that, but no, it was a good time.
Were you on a honeymoon, or were you still in the post-wedding high and then you get more good news?
No, so it was interesting. My agents were at the wedding and they came up to me at one point and they said, "Hey, like, if we think that some trades might happen, and if that does, then we think you'll be on." So there was a nice little wedding gift at the wedding that they told me about, and then it didn't end up working out, obviously, like confirming that until later in the week. And my wife and I were not going to take our honeymoon until next fall, where we have a little bit more freedom to go where we please, rather than have to find somewhere where I'd have to continue doing my workouts. So
Right.
we're taking a little breather before we go do the honeymoon. So we were still in Iowa at the time.
And depending on how the next season goes, maybe you'll have a little more money to spend on the trip.
Yeah,
we'll see.
That would be very nice.
Well, we'll talk about the baseball, but I guess we'll bury the lead, as we sports writers say here, and talk about your side gig for a bit here. And I told you this via email, but it's very flattering to the ego of a sports writer like me that you are interested in pursuing that also, because it's not universal, but it's not uncommon for people to end up writing about sports because they had to stop playing them. And that was their way to stay close to the game. And so here you are. You have not been forced to stop playing them. In fact, your career is ascendant, and yet you're still interested in doing the thing that we ink-stained wretches and scribblers do. So tell me about your interest in sports writing and how and when this started.
Yeah, so it was probably, I want to say the off season of 2023, where I had been back home. I was living in Des Moines. My parents, that's about 30 minutes from Indianola. So my parents were like, "Hey, we really need a sports writer. I know you studied history, so you like did a lot of writing and stuff, but like, do you think you could write a couple sports stories for us?" And I was like, I mean, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm completely terrified because I don't want to look like an idiot to all these people reading this, but I'll give it a go. So I went and covered a couple high school football games, showed up with basically just a little black notebook to keep notes. And since then I started bringing my laptop to take a little bit more detailed notes. And it really just kind of blossomed from, I need a little bit of extra cash in the off season, and my parents needed a sports reporter. And I found like I kind of actually enjoy doing this. I get to see a lot of kind of up and coming players throughout the county in Central Iowa, and see some really talented players actually.
It is very funny that a professional athlete would pick up sports writing to make more money, because that's kind of, it's not the most lucrative career.
Yeah, right. It's the nature of minor league baseball, where you get paid, and it's obviously 100% better than it used to be, but it's still not quite as much as you might want it to be, especially in the off season. So it's just a little extra boost to just kind of get you through the off season. It's not like a major league player may not need the money quite as much as a guy coming off of his first low A, high A season.
Right. And if you are a major league player at some point, as you hope you will be, then how will that affect your sports writing aspirations? Do you think, will you want to kind of keep a finger in just for the love of the game, so to speak?
Yeah. I mean, I always, like I said, my parents run the paper, and I don't want to really necessarily leave them out to dry as much. And I've come to enjoy it. So I'll probably continue doing some writing. At the very least, I'll continue writing the column that I do for the paper. Whether I do as much with the actual athletics side of it, like covering the high school side, I'm not sure. But I know for sure I'd continue doing the column. I think people around town really enjoy it, and it acts as a sort of diary for me, so I can get some stuff out when I need to.
Yeah, much more material for call to the bullpen. Although, really,
exactly.
you're working as a starter these days, right? So I guess you're not getting called in from the bullpen, except unless you're warming up there before first pitch.
Yeah, pretty much. We couldn't think of a better name for it, so we're like, yeah, that's kind of a clever name. We'll go with that. So that's kind of how that one ended up.
Yeah, well, I love it. I guess there are some sports writers who might be threatened by this. Like, oh, he's a two-way player. He can do it all. Like, get off our turf, like you're encroaching on our corner. Like, you're athletically blessed, and we're here relegated to writing. And you think you can do that too, big shot?
They should feel very secure, because as much as my writing has improved over the last 2 or 3 years, it's still not as good as some of these very skilled sports reporters. So,
well, you're a sports writing prospect as well as a baseball prospect, I guess.
We'll call it that. That works.
I've always thought that, and kind of fantasized about being the one in the clubhouse, if I were a player, who the beat writers would want to talk to. Like, I'd be the guy with the go-to quote, standing there, and they know they can come to me to give them some good material, which the fact that I've even fantasized about that as opposed to like athletic success probably goes to show that I'm in the right line of work, I guess. And your other line of work, I'm probably not quite cut out for, because the whole idea of like, I'll be the best quote on the team, that's not exactly what you probably grow up imagining when you're, in the backyard with the it's game 7 scenario.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say. It's, more so pretending that I'm winning the World Series than that. But I kind of understand it. Just the nature of what your job is, that's kind of what you think about.
Well, and has being on the other side of the tape recorder or the digital recorder or whatever it is, and having to collect quotes now, has that made you more conscious of not just sort of spewing cliches when someone comes to you after a game? You want to give them something good? Yeah,
absolutely. It was funny. A couple weeks after being traded to the White Sox, I was doing something for their media people, some interview. I can't remember what it was for, but I remember calling my mom afterwards, and I was like, Mom, I just gave the worst interview of my entire life. Like, it was so bad. And she's like, why? It was like, I stuttered. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to say. I felt like I was talking in circles. It was very funny, because now that I see like all these high school kids, and obviously high school kids don't know how to give an interview. They're high school kids. They're just talking. So I see all these kids talk in circles, not really answer questions, not really give full in-depth answers. And I'm like, okay, now I'm starting to see the problems of things that I did. And I still don't miss the landmines for them, but I know that they're there.
Yeah. Have you gotten media training as a player? Just, hey, here's what to say, how to say it, what not to say, how not to get yourself into trouble, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, when I got drafted, the Rays did a maybe an hour or so long media training of, hey, don't leave your teammates out to dry. Like if you messed up that day, like just take the punches. It'll be much easier than a 3-day story of you missing the questions rather than a one night of you having a bad game and some stuff like that. Like always make sure you're saying nice things about other people, like trying to look like a gracious person.
Yeah.
And I think those are all very, very good things to keep in mind when answering questions.
There are probably some people out there who are thinking, oh, Nepo baby, Duncan's parents own the paper. That's how he gets the gig. And let me tell you, you're not the only Nepo baby in sports journalism or the only person who is partly supported by their parents, because that's how a lot of people get into the business, for better or worse. But tell me about the paper and about their journalistic careers and how they ended up in that position.
Yeah, so my mom and dad have been in newspaper. For sure, my mom has been in newspapers for literally my entire life. And my dad was in the papers in the Ames area and then a couple other places. And then he took a small hiatus to be a state representative in the state house, and then came back to it. But he does all the photography stuff, or a lot of the photography things, while my mom does a lot of the editor, publisher role. She'll obviously write some stories because it's not a very large newspaper. There's not really that many reporters that they have employed. So they run it pretty small. So they do most of the work themselves. They cover Warren County, which is Indianola and the surrounding towns. So like Norwalk, which you had mentioned in your introduction, and then a couple other smaller high schools around the county. And those are kind of my responsibility when they play sports. So getting to drive out to some of these towns of maybe 700 people is always a very fun experience for me, getting to see a different side of it.
And as the paper's name suggests, this is an independent paper. And as I'm sure you're aware, it's a challenging time for local media and local papers these days. There's just been this great contraction, a death of local media, and it has really negative effects. It can increase political polarization because just all politics is national now. It can reduce oversight of local government. There's no media watchdogs out there. It can create a news desert where there's just no coverage of a local area. So how are they making this work, and how hard has that been?
You know, I would almost say that is part of the reason that it does work. I think that people want to have local papers. They want to know what's going on in their town. They want to be able to look in the paper and see their kid playing basketball. So when my mom first decided she was going to start doing this, she had relatively recently been laid off of the Gannett conglomerate, I guess, with the Record Herald and the Des Moines Register. She had been with them for a long time, and eventually was laid off as newspapers were contracting, as you mentioned. And then she decided she was just going to start writing a news blog, essentially just covering city council and maybe a couple other smaller stories around. And then she realized, hold on, I'm kind of getting a lot of people to read this. Like, let's see what happens. And they started this newspaper, and it's been pretty successful over the last 5 or so years. And I think that one of the reasons for that is because people are interested in what's going on in their town. And now that they have a place that they can go and see it, it makes it much more accessible and much more easier for them to consume, just because my mom is a great writer and does a very good job of making things that might seem complicated pretty easy to understand in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. Was that local coverage of you important when you were an amateur athlete, let's say? Were you saving clippings, or did you think, oh, this is cool, I'm in the paper?
Yeah, I definitely thought it was cool. I mean, like at our high school, there was like a clipboard of like our students in the news kind of a thing. And it was always kind of cool to like go up to see this board as the year went on, and you got to look at, oh, there's this person in the paper for doing this thing. And, oh, there's this other person. So it was always like, people were always pretty interested in it, at least in high school, because, well, I'm in the newspaper. And I think that that's kind of part of the reason that I've started to look at this more as something fun to do rather than just a job. Because I get to give that to some of the high school students around, where they get to look at this and say, hey, look, guys, I'm in the paper.
And I guess the unionization of the minors, did that happen the year after your debut season, just after you got drafted? And then
Yes.
I think,
I
and
want to
so
say,
I,
yeah, the
yeah,
CBA was signed the 23, I think. So, yeah.
right. So you got in just before that happened. So as you mentioned, conditions have improved, pay has improved, nutrition, all the rest of it, but it's still not the most lucrative, at least especially
Right.
in the lower minors. So yeah, how has that changed the need or the desire for guys to get jobs other than the year-round job of prepping to be a professional athlete? But, it used to be commonplace in Major League Baseball for guys to get jobs in the offseason, and now not so much. But in the minors, it's still pretty common. Guys will get coaching jobs and do something baseball related often. But is it as pressing now? Is it just because, it used to be that, you play for a few months and you don't get paid well during those months, and then you have to support yourself somehow?
Yeah, I think that I would say most guys probably have something, whether it's finishing school or working, like giving lessons or stuff like that. But I think you're right that it's definitely less pressing than it used to be, especially for guys that signed for a lot of money out of the draft or whatever.
Yeah.
They've got kind of money to fall back on, but I was an 18th round pick. I don't exactly have that. So
Right.
even as the conditions improved and you get paid more during the off season, you still have to go home and you still have to make rent. And whatever you were able to save during the season really only goes so far. So having something supplemental like that is beneficial in that way. But it's still, like I said, a little bit less pressing.
Yeah. What did you do with your big $25,000 bonus after? Did you just splurge on a mid-tier, reasonably priced car or something?
No, I actually pretty much immediately put it into a high yield savings and a small mutual fund. So
right.
I tried doing my best to save it.
Yeah, that's a good move, I think. I've actually had an Iowa State representative on the podcast, JD Schulten,
Really? Yeah.
who is, you know him. He's, of course, a pitcher as well. So he has multiple jobs. And one of his issues was the MLB TV blackouts in Iowa, which I know have been really burdensome because you're blacked out of 6 teams, despite most of them being very far away. And I assume that's still the case. So if you were to debut for the White Sox, your parents would have to go see you in person. I mean, I'm sure they would want to anyway, but your friends, your extended family in Iowa would not be able to watch you, I guess, through legal means, through MLB TV, because that's still an issue, right? So has that been a problem for you just coming up as a baseball fan?
Yeah, I always would flip on a game and it'd be like name 2 random teams, and it would always be those teams. And if there's a couple local stations that would play the Cubs or occasionally the White Sox, but like if you wanted to find a Royals or a Cardinals game on a random Thursday night, like good luck, like not happening. But like you said, like a lot of my family and friends, Chicago's about a 5 or 6 hour drive from where I'm at, so it's kind of reasonable for a lot of people. And a lot of my friends and family made the trip over to Omaha when we were up there. So I don't think that it would necessarily prevent a lot of people from driving over to Chicago and seeing me play there for the first time. But just in general, I think JD's on the nose with the blackouts. I think that at the very least, there's room to make an extra level of the subscription to get through the blackouts and just put the local station on that broadcast. Like I'm not sure why the blackouts exist. Like I can't imagine that any reasoning really makes up for kind of the lack of coverage of teams that people probably really care about.
How do Iowans feel about Field of Dreams? Are you just like so inundated with Field of Dreams from childhood that you're sick of it, or are you obligated to love it, or what are your feelings about it?
I'm not sure if it's so much an Iowa thing, or at least for me, it's not so much an Iowa thing. It's more of just how much do you love baseball? Like for me, I love the Field of Dreams. It's really cool. Don't tell Iowans. I've never actually been. We're a good 4-hour drive away from Dyersville, probably, if I had to guess. So it's never really been in the cards for me to get out there just because I've always been busy. But I think that the idea of it is cool, and beyond just, oh, let's make a movie about a guy with a baseball field in his cornfield. It's not so much about that. It's about loving something so much that you're willing to sacrifice for it. And I think the idea behind that is awesome, and it's kind of a really cool message for them to put out to people. And I really enjoy the game that they hold there when the Yankees and the White Sox played out there back in 2022 was such a cool game. Having guys come out of the field, I mean, it's just a really cool atmosphere, and it's a place you don't get to see big league players play. So it's an interesting spot.
Yeah, you were a few years late, I guess. Maybe if the White Sox can go back there, then you can finally make it to Dyersville. You can actually just pitch. That'd be nice.
Yeah, I'd be good with that.
That'd be a good just human interest story for the game, I think. Just, at least promote you, keep you around the hometown kid playing in the Field of Dreams game that would play well. So as a prospect, as a baseball player, I'm sure that you study what other pitchers do and you compare yourself to their stuff, and maybe you model yourself after them to some extent. Do you do that now as a writer? You were just the subject of a good profile from the Des Moines Register, that's how I heard about your other career. And so are you reading that and kind of evaluating it now as a writer and trying to figure out what can I pick up from this, or reading other baseball writing or sports writing to mine it for tips and tricks?
Yeah, to an extent, for sure. I think my biggest problem with sports writing typically is that I add too much to it. Like it's too long. So
yeah, you and me both.
I've tried to learn from people how to write interesting things, like things that sound interesting to read without adding 50 extra words that don't need to be there. Mm-hmm. That's kind of been my struggle. I've picked up a couple of phrases like where kind of it's fluff, really. Mm-hmm. Sorry, there are dogs going crazy.
It's okay.
But it's fluff, if we're being honest. But it's interesting fluff that doesn't take too long to say. Mm-hmm. So I've kind of picked up some of those short phrases as well.
Yeah, it's like learning a new pitch or something
sure.
else you've done and maybe are doing. You wrote a column, I think, last offseason about just what the offseason is like for a player, and you've gone to an independent facility to work on things, and yet you're in communication with the team. So how have things changed since you were traded last year or earlier this year from the Rays to the White Sox? What did the White Sox tell you about what they want you to work on, if anything that's different from what Tampa Bay told you?
Yeah, no, I think that the White Sox have done a good job with kind of understanding where I'm coming from. The Rays are obviously a fantastic organization all across the board, especially with their pitching side. So I think the White Sox kind of understand that and say, you're coming from an org that does a really good job of pitching. These are our suggestions. We kind of know that you understand this. So, for example, like this offseason, I really was not looking to change a whole lot pitch-wise. And then I was throwing some changeups. I was like, man, I really don't like this changeup. So I was texting with Zach Bove, the new pitching coach, and he's like, have you ever tried the kick change? So we're kind of it's less like we think you need to work on this, and more almost like spitballing ideas.
But don't do an actual spitball. That's still against the rules.
Yeah, that'd be gross, and I think it might be illegal.
It is.
But
yes.
it's that kind of idea where you're just kind of you're bouncing ideas off of each other rather than one person telling you to do something.
Yeah, and I noticed that it's kind of the opposite of the typical progression in the minors. You sort of started as a swingman or maybe even mostly a reliever and kind of struggled in that role out of the gate. And then you were converted to starting, and you've had a lot of success in that role, which is it's kind of backwards, right? Because often guys will start their professional careers as starters, and then maybe they'll struggle, and then they get moved to the bullpen. And you've kind of gone in the other direction.
Yeah, and it's an interesting story just because it was really just luck. I got lucky that I got to start because we had a guy get hurt when I was in Bowling Green. I was the only guy who hadn't thrown. I was capable of going multiple innings. They're like, all right, you got it. Get out there. So I kind of went back to what my college pit or pre-pitch routine was and threw well. And they're like, okay, well, we'll see what happens. And the guy was hurt another week, and I got to continue starting and continue to improve. And it was very clear that the routine was helpful for me. I wasn't wasn't as sure how to throw out of the bullpen as I was as a starter. I think that since being in professional baseball longer, I think I might have a better understanding of how it might work. But at the time, I really had zero idea. I was kind of just doing things and either wasn't prepared or was even slightly too, like, I don't want to say over prepared, but like to a point where it was detrimental, if that makes sense. So kind of understanding, I was more comfortable for sure in that new role. I think the routine made a big difference. It's obviously a lot easier to pitch when you have an idea of what situations you're going to be put into. And when you're always put into nobody on, nobody out, first inning, clean inning, you kind of know what to expect at least a little bit.
So describe yourself as a pitcher as if you were writing about yourself. I guess, how would you describe your repertoire, your approach to pitching?
I would say low slot carry. It's relatively average carry, but the low slot kind of allows me to get away with it, if you will. Not necessarily overpowering with velo, but it'll get on you, just a little bit deceptive. 3 different shapes of breaking balls, short, hard curveball, sweeper, and a cutter. The changeup is more or less a non-factor at this point, but it's developing, I would say. Those are the main ideas.
Well, Eric Longenhagen, who's the lead prospect analyst for FanGraphs, I looked up what he's written about you. And when you were on the Rays prospect list a year ago or before this past season, he said that you would have a sneaky 40-man case 9 months from now. So he nailed that. Good projection. Yeah. And he did describe you as a funky low-slot guy at Iowa who has successfully been turned into a back-end starter prospect in pro ball. His arm slot has been raised some, and he's throwing strikes with a rise/run fastball and sweeper. Both play as average due to Davitt's ability to hide the ball. And that's what you were just talking about, I guess, with the deception. And I'm always fascinated by deception, and people mean more than one thing sometimes when they say deception. And it can be just the way your pitches move relative to your release. But that ability to hide the ball, I always find really fascinating. So is that something that you hear from hitters, that they don't see the ball that well? Is that just because, I don't know, is it coming out from behind your back late or something along those lines?
And that's funny because what I've always heard, I think deception is basically just being weird or having something weird, right? So when I throw, people have told me it looks like you're going to throw from a pretty normal slot, and then all of a sudden it's coming out of your armpit. I was like, oh, okay, that's an interesting way of thinking about it. But that's how people have described it to me. So it's essentially, if you can get somebody to expect a certain release point and you're 2 feet away from that release point, you're probably in pretty decent shape at that point because you're not picking up the ball quite as soon. Yeah. And that's going to put you ahead as a pitcher.
And I assume that wasn't intentional. It wasn't as if you crafted this release to maximize the deception. It was just sort of natural. So I always wonder how teachable that is. Do you think that you could have just developed that if someone had said, hey, we need you to be a little more deceptive? Like once you get to this stage, are you sort of locked into that kind of characteristic, or can you tinker with that even after you're pretty established?
I'm not really sure because I will say the slot and some of the release stuff is kind of a side effect of some mechanical work I did as a freshman or between my freshman and sophomore year of college. I had a massive elbow hike at the time, which is obviously very dangerous. So they spent a summer fixing it, and this is kind of the release that ended up coming out of it. So I'm not sure how much you could teach somebody to do it. I'm not sure you would teach somebody to do it, but there are big leaguers you can point to nowadays that have that similar low slot carry. Like you have a Max Scherzer, obviously Brian Wu is the famous one now. Yeah. You had asked earlier if I model people for writing. Well, these are the guys I model after for baseball because we're kind of in the similar release heights, similar arm angles. So what they do is something that might work for me. But no, I don't think I would try and teach a teach a 12-year-old to throw like me. I think I'm a little too weird.
Well, I guess it's good that that kind of thing can be quantified now, where, maybe if the radar gun reading, which isn't even really a radar gun anymore, but if that doesn't blow people away, then you can still figure out, why does this work? Why is this guy having some success? And you could always have a scout just say, oh, hitters have a hard time hitting off of him or something.
Mm-hmm.
But when you can actually say it's because of the slot and the way the pitches move, and you can kind of identify it in a more objective way, and maybe that gives you a better opportunity.
For sure. I think that's one of my favorite parts about baseball, is that there's a million and one different things that are being tracked to understand why something works and why it doesn't. So that's one of my favorite things to understand, especially coming from Iowa, that did a really good job of doing their analytics stuff as well as the Rays, but obviously on different budgets. But kind of getting to see those two high level analytics departments go to work is always is fun for me, because you get to understand a little bit more than you maybe would have.
And by modern pitching development standards, you're kind of an Iron Man. You threw 152 innings this past season. That was third in minor league baseball, and you were less than an inning behind the leaders. So what do you think of pitcher development these days? Because there are a lot of people who think, gosh, these guys coming up, they never go deep into games. They never have an opportunity to really build their arms up. And, it makes some sense, because then you get to the majors and guys aren't going as deep into games there either. But sometimes you have never seen the seventh or eighth inning, by the time you get promoted to the majors. And then are you conditioned to do that? Do you know how to work through a lineup multiple times? So do you think that it's a good way to prepare people for that ultimate assignment, or is that impulse to protect pitchers, is there a downside to that?
I think that you maybe lose some of the fun, like, oh, he went 9, or like you went 8 2/3 or whatever. You lose some of those stories. But I think in the grand scheme of things, like, your goal is to win as many games as possible. And if the best way to do that is to have your first, second, and third starters pitch as many games as possible, and then just get it to your bullpen arms that you're paying an exorbitant amount of money to win you baseball games from the sixth inning on, I feel like that's the way that it would work normally. And then you start getting into the analytics part of it. But essentially my thought is like, if you run your first 3 starters out and just run them down and they're all throwing 100, like, there's only so many pitches you can do, or you can throw throwing 100, right? At some point your body's just not going to be able to take it. So that's why we see a little bit dip in workload as far as like the volume.
Yep.
I would almost argue that the workload itself isn't necessarily changing. It's just changing from the volume to, I guess, the intensity of it, where you're just putting all of it into one pitch rather than expanding it over 100, if that makes sense. But then you start talking about analytics in the third time through and putting your guys in the best situation to have success. And that kind of factors into it a lot as well.
Yeah. There's still some old school sports writers around who hate to talk about and think about this stuff. So you're ahead of the game when it comes to your second job, I think, just being aware of these concepts and interested in them.
Yeah, I think I think my first job gives me an interesting perspective on that sort of stuff.
So in the aforementioned profile in the Register, Paul Janisch, who is a former big leaguer, director of player development for the White Sox, is quoted saying, I do think he gets the chance this year. That is the call to the big leagues. I'm sure it's exciting and encouraging to read that. Probably also causes some nerves, I would imagine. So when you see that, how does that make you feel? And, of course, it's going to come down to both your performance and the opportunity, just like that start you mentioned in the minors where someone had to get hurt for you to get that assignment. But what are you thinking that you're going to be doing and working on to make Janisch's prediction come true? Yeah,
I think that there's a lot of just be where your feet are at. You know what I mean? Like, just execute what you can control, do your best, and whatever happens is what's going to happen. There's only so much you can control with that stuff. So for me, it's just show up, throw my innings, limit the runs, and if the team wants me up there, they'll have me up there, and nothing I do beyond be successful is going to get me there any faster. Yeah. Unfortunately, sometimes that's just the way it works. and I've come to terms with that. I think that that's the way baseball is if you don't like it, play better. So you play better, and you make the team make the decision. And so for me, I think that comes down to improving some change of stuff, improving execution within the zone to better locations in the zone and better execution of two strikes and those sorts of things. So if I can execute and manage those things, I think things can go my way.
And I assume you'll be in big league camp when spring starts this year. Have you gotten the invite or?
Right. So the 40-man players are always invited to big league camp.
Right. So that's exciting.
It's my first one. So I'm pretty excited about it.
One thing I was wondering, it was easy to contact you, which was a relief, because when you want a player on the podcast, sometimes you've got to go through the team media relations folks and, or maybe you can follow them on social media and hope they follow you back or something. But you have your email address on your author page, which is handy. I wonder whether that will continue to be the case because, we hear so much from players in baseball, but also other sports about just the abuse that they get online. Sure. From sports bettors, right? And, some parlay goes wrong and they take it out on them and just death threats and the most heinous stuff. Yeah. I wonder, have you gotten some of that even in the minor leagues? Does it extend down there?
I haven't.
That's good.
Yeah, which I mean, if somebody's placing bets on minor league baseball, they need to probably have some help.
Yeah.
But no, I've been fortunate enough not to have any of that abuse. And like you mentioned, like if I do make it to the big leagues, that email may have to go.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate. It's one of the ways that some people that read my column are able to interact with me, and I enjoy that interaction because I get to answer deeper questions. I get to have suggestions for future columns. So those sorts of things will be missed, obviously, but I'd prefer not to have more stories or more war stories I can trade with other players who have had similar threats in the locker rooms. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully people are gracious enough and I can keep the email there. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out.
Yeah. And how did you find out that you were traded? Were you expecting that on any level?
Not really. It was funny. So I was in Durham and we were playing in Gwinnett at the time. And we obviously all knew the trade deadline was coming up. And one of my teammates was kind of looking around the room. We're all predicting who's going to get traded. And he points to me and goes, "You're going to the Cubs." And I'm like, "Me? The Cubs? Okay. Yeah, sure, dude."
Close.
No. Yeah. Which of course this guy ends up getting traded anyway. So, or as well, but no, the actual stories I find funny because the trade wasn't announced until maybe 15 or 20 minutes after the deadline had already passed, I think, something like that. So I had been sitting in the training room. We were in a rain delay, and I was sitting in the training room watching the Rays game, and they had a little ticker of the trade deadline falling. And it's like, okay, like trade deadline's over. Like I'm sticking around. And then next thing I know, I'm looking at Morgan Ensberg poking his head around the corner, giving me the "come here" finger. And I was like, I look at somebody and I'm like, did he point at me? And the guy just shrugged. So I'm like, "You're super helpful. Thanks." And then walked in and he told me the news with myself and Ben Peoples. And from there, we packed up our lockers and we're on a flight the next morning back to Durham to pack up our apartments and drive over to Charlotte.
Do you have to disclose that you are a sports writer either to your teammates or to the team? I mean, we're way past, Jim Bouton and Ball 4 and it being controversial to write about what happens in the clubhouse. But I wonder, just to sort of be on the safe side, did you ever run this by anyone and say, "Hey, what are the ground rules here?" Or is there anything I can't disclose?
I talk to people or I tell people when they ask what I do in the off season. I really don't write a whole lot about what goes on specifically in the clubhouse. And if I ever did, I would say, "Hey, I'm planning on writing this and I'm going to include a story that involves you. Do you care if I write this? I'll leave your name out of it," kind of a deal. But I've never had issues when people find out that I'm a sports reporter. They kind of just laugh and they're like, "Oh, that's interesting. Like I've never heard of that job in the off season." But I've never had any issues of like sitting down with an HR person saying like, "You can't write about this, and this." And I like to believe I have enough discretion not to write about things that people wouldn't want in the newspaper. if that makes sense. So
Yeah. Okay. Can I ask you a weird one?
go for it.
Okay, this is a listener email we got a while back, but I've been waiting to spring this on a player from listener
geez.
Patreon supporter Sam, who apologized and said, "This is a weird one. Can't even say I'm high this time." What percentage of pitchers wear hard cups while pitching? And the question continues, I recently spoke to a guy from my hometown who was in the Phillies system. He mentioned it was frustrating because all pitchers were forced to wear cups while pitching. Has there been any reporting on forced cup usage in MLB? Not to my knowledge, but maybe you can make that your next column. On a more general level, is there an incident you can recall where a player has ever publicly blamed an athletic cup for something related to on-field performance? I'm mostly interested in that first question.
Yeah.
How common is the cup for pitchers?
I would say exceedingly rare.
Really?
I don't know if
Okay.
I know any pitchers that wear one. I'm sure that there are, but I don't think I've been on a team that with a guy that wears one.
Wow.
I did back in high school because I also played a position. So if for whatever reason my pitch count was a little bit lower, I would go play a position afterwards. So I'd wear one in high school. But as soon as I got to college, I was like, man, this thing sucks. So I stopped wearing it at that point. And I think I'm definitely a majority of people that don't wear it. I would imagine that it's a pretty small number. I couldn't give you a percentage, but I would imagine it's a very small percentage of professional pitchers wearing protective cups.
Interesting. So I don't know how closely you observe this, but what do you think the positional percentages are then? I mean, if you're an outfielder, I'm sure you're going cupless, but the closer you are to the action, if you're on the corners, if you're a middle infielder, like is everyone other than the pitcher cupping up on the infield?
You know, I don't know. I know the catchers do. Thank
Yes,
God.
of course.
I don't know about the infielders. I know that it's definitely more common than the pitchers.
Yeah.
But yeah, I certainly have not been keeping a list of, okay, this guy wears one, this guy wears one, this guy doesn't, and what position they are. So I don't think that's a study I think I'm going to do either.
Yeah.
I think that one might cause some issues.
Yeah.
In
you definitely
the
have to
clubhouse.
anonymize that one. You'd have to keep the names out of it.
Certainly.
Yeah, because I would imagine, I mean, I don't know if you've had any close calls, but you're quite close to the action. Now,
Sure.
If you're a pitcher, of course, you're worrying more about just like being hit in the head or something by a comebacker. Right. That's actually dangerous, life-threatening even. Mm-hmm. So maybe you're worried about that more so. But there's room to worry about both, I guess. It's just that maybe you can't be conscious of that and perform well because, it would just make you kind of tentative. And I suppose the discomfort factor, which is something that, people ask us all the time, well, why don't pitchers wear more protective headgear? And there are cap liners, but, there are also other things. I mean, you could have sort of a softball style mask of some sort, but pitchers in baseball, they just generally don't do that. And, people wonder, like, is this a macho thing? Is it just old habits dying hard? Like, is it going to have to take someone getting seriously hurt for pitchers to embrace that? So I assume with the cup, it's just that there'd be some chafing or something. You're doing a full wind up. It might impact your mobility, perhaps. So I assume that comes into it. But with the protective gear in general, is it that you feel like you're invulnerable out there, or is it just that, well, you're playing the odds and you're hoping that you will perform well and that nothing bad will happen?
Yeah, I think it's probably more so on that last part. You really don't think about it. Like, I've known a couple players that have been hit and in the heads, and one of them I was playing summer ball with it back in 2020, and he had some lingering health issues with it. So it is something that people need to understand. Like, this is a real danger, but at the same time, like, if you're walking out on that mound, like, you can't be thinking about this. You can't be thinking like, what if I hurt my arm? What if I tweak my elbow? Like, what if I do this thing? Like, if you're thinking about those things, you're certainly not going to have a good day. Yeah. Because your mind's not in the right place. You're, like you said, you're going to be tentative and scared. I don't want to get hit, so I'm not going to throw this ball in the strike zone. I don't want him hitting it back at me. Those sorts of things. So it's not something that ever really crosses my mind. And I would imagine that's the case with most players. Now, that said, I think that if the league mandated some kind of headgear, I think that people would have a pretty big issue with it, just in terms of whether, oh, this is so uncomfortable, or wow, I feel like such a wussy kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. I think that you would have both of those as reactions. But for me, it's just something I really don't ever think about.
Lastly, this is the week of Christmas, so it may be atypical, but take me through a typical day or week in the off season of Duncan Davitt as you're trying to balance your, gym time and pitch prep, and you're going to be ramping up for spring training fairly soon, but you're also covering high school basketball. So how does that all work?
Yeah. So before the basketball season, we put together a whole spreadsheet of these are all the games we're going to cover, or we think that we're going to cover, with some room for adjustment based on how good a team is. So that helps. But a typical day, I would usually get to the gym or get to go throw or wherever, typically around between 10 or 11. And then if I have a lift that day, I'll get the lift in afterwards. I'm usually done by one or two, depending on how long everything takes and how much talking I do with people around. And get back, eat, shower, do all the good things. And then games don't start until 6, so I usually have a little bit of downtime between working out and the game that I'm covering that night, and usually drive over there wherever it may be, whether it's in Indianola, which is about a couple minutes from where I live, or further out, which out to like 20 or 30 minutes. But it's usually pretty easy of a balance as far as within the day. The week to week, it's a little hectic sometimes because we do a short write-up every week on how the team's fared in the previous week. So Sundays can get a little bit hectic just because that's a little bit longer of a story.
Well, I will be reading your writing and watching your pitching and rooting for you as a writer and a pitcher. I hope both of these dreams come true and that you hit your word count targets and your pitch count targets and your deadlines and all the rest. So good luck with all of it, Duncan.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Thanks to Declan and Duncan, and also Patreon supporter Luke, who emailed us recently to flag Duncan as a potential future Meet a Major Leaguer subject. This is relevant to both Declan's and Duncan's interests. I was reading a recent edition of David Laurila's Sunday Notes at FanGraphs, and he writes, Derek Shelton is now managing in Minnesota after being at the helm in Pittsburgh for 4 full seasons and parts of 2 others. He was asked at the winter meetings what he learned about developing young hitters during his time with the Pirates. Quote, I learned that AAA does not prepare you for the big leagues, said Shelton. I think that's the biggest thing. It's why we're seeing, as an industry, so many young players come to the big leagues and struggle. They just don't hit. The pitching is just too good here. The distance between the talent in AAA and the big leagues is probably the greatest it's ever been. Well, I'm not sure I would apply the Pirates' struggles to the rest of the league. I have harped on this before. I've written about this topic twice. You hear this a lot these days. Buy it. And I just don't buy it. I mean, maybe the gap is the greatest it's been, but barely. It's not much bigger than it's been before, if at all. I wrote about this in the spring at The Ringer with some help from Dan Szymborski of FanGraphs. And we looked at the statistical translations over time. How did players fare in AAA and in the majors after being promoted? And we looked at an almost 50-year period. And I wrote, the strength of AAA relative to the majors has fluctuated within a fairly narrow range from about 76% of MLB to about 86%. It's certainly at the low end of that range now, so it's fair to say that the AAA to MLB leap has never been more daunting. The thing is, these effects are subtle, which is why I said it's sort of true that moving from the minors to the majors is harder than ever. It is, but only by a few percentage points. Probably not by enough that anyone would make much of it, if not for the much more salient, albeit superficial effects of offensive flood tides and ebb tides lifting or lowering all bats in leagues across multiple levels. And that's what I thought was the real reason why you hear this refrain frequently these days, and why you heard it often about a decade ago when I first wrote about this for Grantland. The level of offense is just higher in AAA relative to the majors than it typically is. And so on the surface, a hitter's stats do tend to take a pretty big hit post-promotion, but their performance relative to the league doesn't actually change that much. And for the article earlier this year, one front office analyst told me, I went poking around and could never really find especially compelling evidence that rookies are struggling to a disproportionate degree. It feels like they are, but they aren't. and maybe we just notice more when they struggle because there are more young players and fewer veterans than ever these days. The pitching gap has definitely widened between AAA and MLB, and that does have an effect, but said effect appears greatly overstated. And actually, just now, I found an article by Baseball Prospectus co-founder Clay Davenport, which was published this past September. And Clay did some research as well and concluded the gap between AAA and the majors, at least in terms of same-year transitions, is essentially unchanged since 2006. You could say that it has gotten little more difficult in recent years, especially compared to the 2010s. So again, the gap is not as enormous by historical standards as you sometimes hear these days, and I guess that's good news for Declan and Duncan. Also, got another email about a baseball show, Abbott Elementary. It's an ABC mockumentary sitcom set in a Philadelphia public school. There's a good chance you're aware of it. It's quite popular. My wife and I watched it for the first 3 seasons, then we drifted away. For me, it falls into the Modern Family zone of being pleasant, likable, very bingeable, but rarely makes me actually laugh. Anyway, because I haven't been watching it much anymore, I missed an episode that aired this past October, Season 5, Episode 3, Ball Game, about which listener Andy writes, in August, the cast and crew of Abbott Elementary shot an episode live at a Phillies game, and they picked the night that Kyle Schwarber hit 4 home runs. Incredible luck. Congrats to them. It really was, because Schwarber was featured in the episode, and it just so happened that they were there on a huge night for him. He actually makes a cameo in the episode, and he does quite well, mostly because it just seems like he's not that conscious of the cameras. He's just acting like Kyle Schwarber would act. Doesn't sound like he's reading off a cue card or anything, or like he memorized his lines. Kudos to Kyle. Anyway, Andy writes, not content with that magic, they piled another rarity on top of it, inserting a fictional triple play into the game. One character narrated it as Sosa to Turner to Harper. And yes, that's Gregory, played by Tyler James Williams, and here he is narrating that play.
Oh no, the other team hit the ball.
And it is stopped by Sosa. Sosa fires to Turner. Turner fires to Harper. Oh my God, it's in the ball!
Andy continues, another character later described it as a 6-4-3 triple play. And here's that clip featuring Janine, played by Abbott Elementary creator Quinta Brunson.
I just wanted you to love baseball as much as I did, but I forced it, and now you...
I love it.
You what?
Yes, I mean, look, I might not know what a 6-4-3 triple play is, or how to read a scoreboard, or where we even parked, but I do know this. I'm going to walk out of this ballpark with stories I'm going to tell forever, and even more love for my city.
Now, as Andy notes, 6-4-3 triple play means Trey Turner would have been playing second base, something he hasn't done since 2021, and the triple play would have been started by Edmundo Sosa, not in the game at the time, from the shortstop position. Nope. In an article on MLB.com about the creation of the episode, a league executive takes credit for nailing the details. Do you think we could shoot the episode at a game, the show asked? Absolutely. Both parties got to work. Quote, they're pitching story and characters. We're pitching how to make it baseball authentic, says Nick Trotta, who is MLB's vice president of global media programming and licensing. Okay, so it's kind of a gotcha. MLB tried to make the baseball authentic, and here is the description of the play by Janine not matching the narration of the play by Gregory. Not only is there narration of the play, but we actually see it briefly. There's a clip of actual game action. And I'm here to sort of support what Andy is saying, but also to say it's okay. So here's the thing. They're inserting a play that did not happen, a triple play, into a game that did happen, the Kyle Schwarber 4-homer game. So already we're departing from authenticity somewhat. And maybe they didn't need to do that. But when we do briefly see the play that they are saying is a triple play, and Gregory references Sosa, well, as Andy said, Sosa was not in that game. And you can see Bryson Stott at second base. So if anything, it would have been Stott to Turner to Harper. And it's not clear where the third out is coming from in that exchange. So yeah, the whole thing is fairly unrealistic. And so Janine describing it as a 6-4-3 triple play, when if anything, it was a 4-6-3. Well, whatever, I'll let it slide, especially because you can defend it in universe on the basis that Janine is not supposed to know anything about baseball. As she says, she doesn't know what that means. And actually, later in that exchange, where she references the 6-4-3 triple play to Gregory, she says this.
40,000 people watching the same game, eating the same snacks, waiting for a fumble.
Strikeout.
I get why they call it the beautiful game.
Soccer.
So that's the running gag throughout the episode, that she does not know anything about baseball. And so for her to say say 643 instead of 463. You could say that, if anything, it supports the pre-established character trait. Now, I suspect that this was sort of a small mistake in the script, that they didn't realize that their description of the play as Sosa to Turner to Harper was not consistent with her description of the 643 triple play, because it's not something that most people would notice. The comedy tends to be a bit broad. She's referencing fumbles and the beautiful game. I doubt the 463 to 643 was also added in there to reinforce how little she knows about baseball, but this one is at least defensible on those grounds. So, not a big deal, especially if we're allowing for the fictional triple play in the first place. It's fun, though. Quite cool that things worked out that way with Schwarber. So, we've gone from AAA to triple play, and it strikes me, by the way, that the conversation we had earlier this week about Munetaka Murakami actually is kind of related to that idea that I just discussed about the gap between AAA and the majors. Well, NPB is generally appraised to be about AAA level, if not kind of quadruple A, and the Murakami detractors are essentially calling him a quadruple A player. That idea that someone can produce prodigiously at one level, but then completely get exposed at the next level up. That's something that I talked to Brent Rooker about on this podcast, because he was sort of seen as a quadruple A player at one point until he proved that no, actually, he could be a quite successful MLB player. So we'll find out whether Murakami is really that kind of talent. I tend to think that the quadruple A archetype is a bit overblown, that if you give a player enough chances, the performance will translate somewhat. Also, thanks to listener Brock and some others, I believe, in our Discord group for notifying us that Effectively Wild was mentioned in a recent online survey by Major League Baseball. Brock says Effectively Wild was name-dropped in an MLB survey earlier this week, and the question in one of these MLB Fans at Bat surveys was, which, if any, of the following baseball podcasts do you listen to regularly? Please select all that apply. And it lists several, most of which are either MLB productions or MLB affiliated, but it also includes Effectively Wild. So for whatever reason, MLB is interested in learning whether its fans listen to this podcast. If you're hearing these words, then I know that you do listen to Effectively Wild. And if you'd like to continue to, perhaps you'll consider supporting Effectively Wild on Patreon, which you can do by going to patreon.com/effectivelywild and signing up to pledge some monthly or yearly amount to help keep the podcast going, help us stay ad-free, and get yourself access to some perks. As have the following 5 listeners: Kyle S., Nick Fontaine, Josh Eisenberg, and Catherine Sobolo. Thanks to all of you. Remember that you can give gift subscriptions to Effectively Wild's Patreon, and Patreon perks include access to the Effectively Wild Discord group, monthly bonus episodes, playoff live streams, prioritized email answers, personalized messages, shoutouts at the end of episodes, potential podcast appearances, and so much more. Check out all the offerings at patreon.com/effectivelywild. If you are a Patreon supporter, you can message us through the Patreon site. If not, you can contact us via email. Send your questions, comments, intro and outro themes to podcast@fangraphs.com. One more reminder to submit stories we missed from 2025. You can rate, review, and subscribe to Effectively Wild on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, and other podcast platforms. You can join our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/effectivelywild. You can find the Effectively Wild subreddit at r/effectivelywild. And you can check the show notes in the podcast post at FanGraphs or the episode description in your podcast app for links to the stories and stats we cited today. Thanks to Shane McKeon for his editing and production assistance. That will do it for today and for this holiday week. We hope you have a wonderful weekend, and we will be back to talk to you next week.
I want to know about baseball. I want to know about every single team. I want to know about setbacks and FanGraphs and about Tony. I'm a very modern fan, reading up on all the analytics. I want to know about baseball, presented by Patreon support.